with you, Rachel. I'll hand over to you, and
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
thank you.
fine. And just to say as well, what I can do, I can very easily pop these slides into a PDF document and wing that over to Nick. And Nick, if you can just distribute those as well. But
Awesome.
I have got some other sort of supporting materials I can flag as well.
Yeah, that'd be
So
really
yes, first of
helpful.
all,
Thank you.
hello everybody. I think I'm looking at faces and names, and you all do sound familiar from the training course. If I met you back in, I want to say May. No, it was earlier than that, wasn't it? April, I don't know. It was lovely to meet you then, and it's
It's
nice to
April.
see
Yeah.
you now. Yeah, April. Bit of a disclaimer. I'm sorry if you hear any sort of sniffing or coughing or occasionally get very croaky. But we're going to power through. I've caught my son's back to school lurgy, but we're going to keep going. So we can answer some questions towards the end and hopefully help you with any queries. I'm going to sort of whiz through these slides just to introduce the scheme, because obviously you're part of Chilterns Tracking the Impact project. So you know all about the project and the 50 survey squares across the Chilterns, which are adopting the MPMS survey methodology. But I just thought I'd add that in, just sort of explain why we're using the plant portal as a repository for the data. So we have these 50 survey squares, and now we've got obviously the extension across the River Chess and the smarter water catchment area. And as you'll know, we're adopting different survey methodologies to record different taxa within these squares. And MPMS, the National Plant Monitoring Scheme, is obviously the survey methodology that's been adopted here. And the plant portal really provided a portal, that's the best word for it, a portal that replicates the data entry process for MPMS data. So it uses all the MPMS recording forms, all the same, background website coding, of which I know nothing of. That's our super clever website developers. So that's our data repository for this project. And of course, then you have these really lovely maps. Actually, I'm very jealous of these maps that you have on the website, where you can go and actually see which squares have actually got data being submitted for them, and some summary information. And I'm going to be quizzing you a little bit at the end, Nick, as to when these get updated. So yeah, brilliant. So the aim of this evening session is to run through the plan portal, as I say, for yourselves. We'll look at the different functionality and look at the data entry processes, really to help them make the most of your experience, and importantly, just make sure that the valuable data that you're collecting actually reaches the project to be analysed. You haven't gone out there collecting this information for it to become lost. So this is a little bit drier than our usual trading offerings, with little to no lovely botanical images. I think I'm probably done with those now, I'm afraid. But rather what I'm going to do is contain sort of screenshots and site visuals and instructions that basically introduce you to the portal, how it looks, what you need to click on and whatnot, so you can use it as a bit of a tool really later, and a bit of a crib sheet later when I send around the PDF, so you can work through it. Because I realise not all of it will go in just listening to me jabbering away now, but you can sort of work through that booklet, pressing next almost, because we just want to get you confident using it. And it does take a little bit of time. I will admit, the first time you use it, like anything, it's something new. But hopefully as you get more confident, it'll get a lot quicker to enter your data. So yes, perhaps the first plot might take a little bit of time, but then you'll get quicker. And I've also added a couple of slides at the end to remind me to flag some additional resources that you can use, both in terms of MPMS methodology, but also training and using the data portal, the plant portal, I should say. So when we get to the plant portal, which I believe you should all have a link to, and Nick will have introduced you to, the homepage shown here just really simply provides a bit of a welcome and some information about the plant portal, and really you can navigate everywhere from this menu bar along the top of the page. But of course, you won't be able to do this until you have logged in. So I don't know if you can see my cursor, actually. I'm wiggling my cursor over login, and I don't know if you can actually see that, but it's on the top right there. So we need to, oh, there we go. I helpfully obviously thought about this yesterday. I was planning. So that's your first step. you need to press login. That is, of course, assuming that you do have an account already within Plant Portal. So as you can see, here's the standard login page with the email address and your password that's required before clicking the login button. But if you haven't yet created an account, then you will need to select this option first at the bottom there. I think everybody should have an account created already, but shout out in a minute if you haven't. And if you ever forget your password, which is very easily done, happens to us all, you have this option to press the forgot password button, much like many of these sites. And essentially you'll provide your email address, you'll receive an email with a password reset button and a chance to reset your password. So once you're logged in, you have an account. I believe Nick, as the administrator for this account, will assign you to this project. So just because you're on Plant Portal and you have an account, you just need to be placed essentially within a project. So you chaps are recording for the Tracking the Impact project, and so Nick will be assigning you to that project, or has already done so. So has everybody, shout now if you haven't created an account? I think you should all have done so. If you haven't, you just click the create new account and fill in this form, but I'm going to happily skip it because I think everybody will have a new account. So once you have logged in, you can take a look at my account as I've shown here. It's your opportunity to see your name, you know, who are you? But you can also edit your account. So you can log in and navigate the site, you can view your account, you can edit it, and of course you need to log out when you have completed entering or viewing your data. Now, if you do select to edit your account, you can change your password if you need something a bit more memorable. For example, if you've been provided something temporary to replace an old password. You can also add a photo of yourself, perhaps, maybe a nice plant picture, but a photo could be helpful if perhaps Nick is helping to do some admin, remembering who's who, but it's completely optional. And lastly, just at the bottom here, I flagged that there is a little button with a checkbox right at the bottom next to training. And basically the training mode part is really important. It's ticked on this example by here because obviously I've been playing about with, I shouldn't say playing about, should I? I've been having a little look within Plant Portal just to get these screenshots and sort of take some slide sort of walk through so that I could put it into this presentation. So I'm very much on training mode, which essentially means it's a practice sort of session. I can't affect any real data that's going to go anywhere. I think that's ticked automatically when you first create your account. So when you are ready and you've had a little look around, you're feeling a little bit more confident within Plant Portal, you can even practice entering data just to see how the process works. It's not a bad idea, perhaps after we've had this session, just to go in and sort of replicate entering some data. Take 2 minutes just to familiarize yourself. But before then, you need to enter data, your real data that you've been out and you've collected. You just need to go to edit. You need to go to this training button, just simply uncheck that box and just be sure that you press save. And then that's obviously you're out of training mode. I would say it's worth, when you've done this, going back to the home page. This just might be me being like super duper cautious, but just go back to the home page, then go back to your account, go to edit and just double check that that did save. I bet it will have, but I'm funny like that and I like to double check before I go ahead and spend time entering all my data. But Anne, that should answer the question that you had earlier. If you uncheck training, you'll be ready to enter your data.
Okay.
Right, so now that you're logged in, we need to head to projects at the top right there within the menu bar. And within that, you need to find the project that you're part of. So you can see there, tracking the impact. You're quite lucky, actually. You're the only project that has its own big, bold menu option. Everybody else has to kind of look through the My Projects or the All Projects to find them. But actually, Tracking the Impact has a nice, big, bold menu option there, Tracking the Impact. And when you select that, 4 additional options will open. And these are the only 4 options really that you're going to need to use to look at the squares or enter any plot information or data. So your options, as you can see, are explore squares. They are to create your plots, data entry, and my visits. So we're just going to go through what each one of those is and how to use it. So we'll look at explore squares first. So when you click on explore squares, it lets you view all the tracking the impact squares. So all of the squares within the project that you're associated to. So that's tracking the impact. And it shows them up on a map. Actually, I think this is an out-of-date example, because this has only got the original 50, but you'll see all the tracking the impact squares on a map. And you can navigate around that map using the left and right arrows and up and down arrows at the top there, and obviously zooming in and out, and to view all of the squares in the Chilterns. And underneath the map, you'll see a list of all the square names, both the name that it's been given and its sort of code. So you can see a couple of examples there. So you can perhaps find the square that you've been assigned to. You could even take a little look at other squares within the project, although of course, please don't edit anything on a square that anybody else is recording on. And you can opt to view plots. So if you can see at the bottom there, we've got Back and Warham, we've got the code, and there's also that option to view plots. So you can see any plots that are associated or have already been created. So if you have a square and you haven't yet created your plots, that list will be completely empty, of course. This is an example that I've just pulled here. I've selected to view plots for square SU9891. I believe it's Chalfont Grove. So I don't know if anybody here has got that square, but that's my example that I pulled. It's a nice, neat example. And you can see here it currently has 5 plots associated with it. So we will go through how to create plots in a moment, but this is just sort of how to view the information for each square. So we've got the 5 plots that have been created. You can see the plot name that it's been given by the volunteer. You can see sort of almost a glimpse really with that centroid, a glimpse of the coordinates where that square, where that plot, sorry, is. And you can also see that there's an option to view details or edit that plot information. So these are little buttons here down on the right of the list with a sort of pad and pencil. So if you were to click that, because these are plots that are already created, we can actually see a bit of information about that plot. We can see that it's a square plot. It's a 10 by 10 woodlands plot, for example. The person has very handily called it plot number 1, a nice clear name. We've got how sloping the plot is. We've got the GPS coordinates of the southwest corner, all of the information that essentially would have been recorded on the ground when somebody was setting up their plot in person. It's been noted at the top of their recording forms, and they've essentially copied that straight into the create plot form, which we'll have a little look at the moment. They've also provided their sketch and a photo and a nice written description of where that plot can be found. So in this, you can submit any changes, or you could delete a plot. So if you decide, no, this plot's no longer possible, we're not going to survey this plot, I've decided to do it somewhere else, you could delete it here as well. But something we would say is, once data has been collected for a plot and it has been submitted, not to change anything. Of course, we should never submit changes. And in fact, I think it's locked. I think once you have data associated to a certain plot, you can't edit plot information, because of course sites should be consistently surveyed. But this is a good place, perhaps, you know, you've done your surveys last year, you come back in spring, you can come and have a look and sort of refresh your memory, thinking about where it was you put that plot again. Where have I got some photos somewhere? It's all nicely in one place to help you relocate it next season. So that's how we explore our squares. So you can do that with all of your squares, or as I say, you can see all the list of all the Chiltern squares. But first we need to create our plots. If you haven't yet created a plot on a Plant Portal for your plots on the ground. So to do this, we head to our projects again, tracking the impact, and we select create plot. So this looks very similar to the form that I just showed you. First of all, you see on the top of this create plot page, it says square name. This one has already been selected, but there's basically a drop down menu. So this is a proper training example here because it's square name 1, but I'm sure it'll have the square name and the square code. So you simply select your square within which you have created plots. You select plot type. Again, that's from a drop down list. You can see the little arrow there actually on the right hand side. So you let Plant Portal know what type of plot it is. Is it a linear plot? Is it a square plot, a 5x5? Or is it a larger 10x10 woodland plot? So you just tell it what type of plot it is that you've set up there. You give it a nice sensible name, as I say, a nice plot label. You notice that I've just skipped there the expert mode. That's because I'm just going to show you how to do a plot, sort of a basic plot, and then at the end I'll just let you know what it means if you choose to select expert mode. Basically because it's all the same, but the expert mode asks for a little bit more information. So we'll go through it all and then we'll come back to expert mode. But as I say, you then enter your plot label, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or some people name their plot something that'll help them remember where they are. You then pop in the GPS coordinates, or the coordinates of your southwest corner, and then you provide some environmental information. So how sloping was the plot, which direction does it face, and so on. Again, the information that you were recording in the field. So if you don't know the GPS coordinates, you can also navigate the map to find your plot location. So there's two options. You either sort of click it on the map or you enter the grid reference. Of course, actually being able to enter the grid reference is going to be more accurate, but obviously we can never assume that everybody's got a means of taking the grid reference on the ground. So it's one or the other, really. So you either use the zoom controls to get the level of detail that you want, and you can alternate between the select tool at the top there. So you can see there's two little tools at the top, one sort of with a four pointing arrowhead to navigate around or drag the map around to find where you want to pop it. And this one that's blue currently to the left, that's the select tool. So once you've selected that tool, you double click on the location that you want. And that gives you the GPS, the grid reference auto-filled where your plot is. That is if you don't have the plot location recorded on the ground. There we go. So I mentioned about the expert mode. So this is just basically some additional tools. And by selecting that sort of little checkbox for expert mode, you have two extra functions on the map. So example here for a square plot. Once you've selected the center of your plot, the square marker will actually be to scale. It will be a 5x5 or a 10x10 square on the ground. And you actually see two additional circles. So the circle in the center of the square allows you to click and drag the marker to amend the location. So if you're not in expert mode, you'd have to sort of keep clicking or double clicking until you got it just right. But in expert mode, you can drag it to find the location that you want. And the second circle actually allows you to click and drag to amend the angle of the square. So obviously we can't always assume that your plots are going to be completely, north to south. They probably will be at an angle. So by going into expert mode, you're able to amend the angle of your plot as well. So that's for square plots. An expert mode does also add some functionality for linear plots. So when you were creating your plots and you selected that it was a linear plot, if you select expert mode, once again, you get an additional function. So you can just see at the top right there, I've highlighted in red an additional tool. It's got what actually looks like a linear plot on it. and using, it's basically a transect tool. And by using that tool, you are able to draw. It shows up a sort of a drawing icon on the map. And once that tool is selected, you can manually click along a feature to draw a line that represents your linear plot. Again, it's not essential, but it means it is a little bit more accurate. We know exactly where the data is being collected, rather than, you know, a close estimate. You can really click along your feature. Because, I mean, let's face it, in nature, I don't know how many things are poker straight. So yes, you use the line drawing tool and you click along your feature, and you just simply double click at the end of the line and it'll be complete. So just single clicks along the feature, double click at the end, and there you've marked your linear plot. So that's it for placing the location. But as in the example that I showed earlier, there's also the opportunity there to add sketches. So you can see over on the far left, it says file upload. And perhaps a little bit confusingly, it just says add sketch, but that's also the place to add photos. It should just say add image, shouldn't it? Or something like that, but it says add sketch. So you can either click that button and use your sort of browser to find your file browser, I should say, to find the images that you want to upload, whether that's your sketch or any photographs that you were taking. We always say it's best practice to take a photograph from the southwest corner looking at your plot each time you visit. So you can either do that.
Could I just ask a question at this point?
Yeah, please do.
I've already created all my plots and I didn't understand that I could upload a photo as well as a sketch. Can I go back retrospectively and change it, or is it too late now I've created it?
Have you entered any data yet?
Not yet, no.
Then nope. I would say you can edit it up to the point that you've actually submitted any data. You can edit it. So where I showed you earlier, where you explore squares, you would find your square, go to view plots.
Yeah.
And then on the plots, you would edit them. And that's just where, again, just how you did it when you created your plots, you would, just press that add sketch button and add any photos. Not a problem. That's what it's something that I keep meaning to bring up, that it's misleading saying add sketch. Yes. So that's brilliant that you've already managed to do that, and you can upload your photos there as well. Or you can do a sort of a drag and drop way of uploading photos as well. I always prefer to use the button because then I know exactly what I'm doing. It feels a lot more, I don't know, it feels more solid. You can then go into the description box and type in anything at all that might be useful. It could be something to do with landowner permissions. It could be something to do with timings. It might be a place where you want to write this plot is only, so this is where I've remembered miraculously. You might want to write, can only do first of the season's survey for this plot owing to presence of hornets, perhaps, or any information like that. Or there may be timing, farmer said only, I can only go between these dates, or anything at all that can help you next year or help us to understand any more information about the plot. So yes.
Can I jump in there, please, and ask a question about adding the sketch? I was able to upload photos, but I couldn't upload the sketches. I have no idea why. Has anybody else come across that?
I wonder if it's possibly, are they saved in a different format? So perhaps your photos are JPEG and the sketches may well be in a different format.
Oh, right. Okay.
In which case, because sometimes actually that's quite likely to be it. So if it was a sketch that you've done in person and then perhaps you've scanned it in, quite often they save as PDF. So you literally just need to save the document again as a JPEG. That'll be it.
I can then add it.
Then you can add it. Quite often things like PDFs, or if it's a scanned document, they can be sort of too large to upload. But by converting it to a JPEG, it should be absolutely fine.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. What I ended up doing was taking a photo of it and uploading the photo of the sketch, which is
that's a good idea too. Yeah, do you know? And I've done it both ways. So yeah, I should have thought to say that as well. Yeah, that's as long as it's clear, of course. As long as when you then look at it next year, you can clearly see it. That's absolutely fine. As long as the sketch is on there.
Thanks.
But no, that's a really good question. That's useful if anybody else comes across the same problem. So yes, once you've got your photos, your images, your maps uploaded, you then just click submit, to make sure that that plot is saved. And I should say, once you've done that, you don't need to do it again. So if there's no change to your plots at all, which there shouldn't be, unless there is a circumstance whereby you can no longer survey on a plot, or you decide, do you know what, I'm going to add a 6th plot or something, I've got an additional plot, in which case you need to create one next year. But actually, if you create all 5 of your plots and you continue to survey those 5 plots next year, you just don't have to do this process. It's already there. It's all saved. You just get on with entering the data. So,
Rachel,
yeah.
Quick question about whether there's any GDPR implications for saving things like farmers' phone numbers in this place.
So that's a really, really good question. So it really depends on, this may well be a question for Nick, what was said in the access permissions letter, sort of what you've told them. So I can only speak on behalf of the MPMS. We in the access permissions, when we request, we say we'd like to store your details, and we give the number of years that we'll be storing it for. We say after, if we haven't been in touch for X number of years, we delete the details. So it will depend on what you've asked for.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head what it says on there, but is this the place to store those letters as well?
It's worth reviewing it. So that's not a place to store the letters. That this is very much notes for yourself. If I always think, if in doubt, leave it out in terms of when it comes to GDPR, because we never want to be caught short in that way. You may just want to put, perhaps if it's a business name or the name of the person, and then that could jog a memory and you can find that information elsewhere. But generally speaking, if you've used a set, Nick, you might be able to help. If you've used a set wording within your permissions request and you've informed them where the data is going to be held, how it's going to be held, and when it's going to be removed, then generally it's fine.
So the short answer, Rachel, that is we haven't driven a kind of constant format as to, I guess, individual volunteers to either go on public areas or to work that through. So the letter has only really been used with some volunteers using it when they need to. So we haven't got a consistent answer to your questions, what I'm clumsily saying. So how best to go around this? I mean, I guess part of the point of this is to actually log your plots, but the part of the point, if Deborah, you gave your square up in a year's time and someone else took it on, they would have contact details. So I hate GDPR.
Don't worry, Nick, I'll just send you.
I think it's a safe enough bet to say, and the landowner is called Fred, and here's his number.
Yeah.
So that someone else can pick it up. It's not strictly to GDPR, is it? But this is a relatively closed.
In this particular case, he's just on. I've just got messenger contact on Facebook, so it's public anyway.
So it's probably exactly. So I think you take a sensible. This is not a publicly accessible site, is it? So it's not like anybody can go in and track down the farmer's phone number from somewhere, or the landowner's phone number. I guess it's more important for the purposes that actually someone knows how to contact the landowner.
Yeah,
that's me saying that pragmatically, not as a GDPR lawyer.
But that's the thing, because half the time this is how we find their contact details, right? Because we go online and we find them somewhere else. I think that the thing is, the create the plot information, or the plot location isn't publicly accessible. The data that is made available to the National Biodiversity Network is your species data. So unless you happen to write on your survey form as well in the comments, oh, and I saw Joe Blogs on that day and he said, X, Y, and Z, which you're not going to do. This is the place for that. I think it's probably fine. And we've got a really similar issue with our MPMS surveys as well, because we provide those letters, but of course it's entirely, the surveyors are responsible for doing that and following that, and providing those letters, which we can't possibly enforce or check on. So we just have to be.
I think even if you use the letter, there's no compulsion on the landowner to sign a form to say, yes, I give you permission, Deborah.
No, exactly.
Your letter is just introducing yourself and saying, I'd like to come and. So I think I would say take a pragmatic approach.
Yeah,
I take, but I'm not a lawyer. But
really useful things to put in that description are things that, really simple things that you wouldn't think, but then next year you think, oh, this year me is really thankful to last year's me for writing down, this is a good place to park. Don't forget to take change, if you need to pay for parking, or, there's there's a tricky bridge to cross, you might want to go a different way, or it's however many paces from this fence post. Anything that's going to help you, as you know, as we found and you found, it can be really hard to find the same plot again. I've been caught out where I think I know a field off the back, you know, like the back of my own hand, and I've got there and gone, oh God, I wish I'd written this down a lot better. So that's really what a really useful use for the description box, to help you re-find where the plot is.
I've done a bad thing and marked the base of a fence post with a pencil.
Yeah. So now that we've created the plots, if we sort of followed that route that we looked at again earlier, where we went to explore squares, and we could find a square and we press view plots. Now that you've created the plots, you can see them. You can see them on the map. So gosh, I don't know if you can see that actually, but if you really look in the middle of that red square, you can see 2 tiny little blue dots. So you can see where your plots are on the map. I should have really zoomed that in before I screenshotted that. You can see where they are on the map, and you can see them listed beneath. So as I said, this can be edited. It can be using that symbol on the right, but only until data has been submitted. And once it has done, then no more editing, basically. So that's how we create our plots.
But it's right. Sorry, Rachel, jump in. It's at this stage, I guess it's like all the setups for all the surveys. You only do this once.
Yep.
So I guess it's just a bit complicated at the moment. Once it's set up and you've got your notes and your parking number and your whatever it is where you're going to,
Yep.
that's it done for you next year, or
Yep.
another surveyor in 5 years' time when you move on, that kind of thing. So it's a one-off one-off thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's one-off, as I say, unless you know, just decide next year, actually, I'm going to create another plot, I'm going to survey somewhere else, that this is it. Now that you've done it once, you don't need to do it again next year. And I'd also say that's why it's quite a good idea to take sort of your time over it and make sure that you do it properly, and you do it clearly. Oh, bye, Deborah.
Excuse me, Rachel, sorry, just
yeah.
So if I'm going to amend my existing plot, am I going in through create plot or through view plot?
Go to view plots.
Yeah.
And then when you click that edit tool,
right, okay,
on the right,
fine, thank you.
A little bit confusingly, it still will say create plots at the top.
Okay.
As a warning, it will say
fine.
that, just because
Thank
you
you.
are sort of creating more information.
Thank you.
But yes, you've done it once, you don't need to do it again. So do take your time, put as much information as you can, because as we've said, you can't edit it after you put data in.
Thank you.
Not a problem. Right, so we're halfway through, kind of. We've explored our squares and we've created plots, and now it's down to the data entry, the all-important data entry. So I just skipped that a little bit quickly, but it's basically it's the next one down. Under create plot, you click data entry. So as soon as you click that, you are met with this page, the data entry page. And data entry is really split into these 3 main sections you can see at the top. You need to provide information about the location. You give survey details, so specific to your survey on the plot for the survey they are entering. And then you've got your species records. So each section must be completed before you move on to the next. So first we have the location. So you select your square from the drop-down menu. I don't know why I keep picking on Chalfont Grove, but I do. So from that one, I have gone down through the list. I found my square, Chalfont Grove. I've clicked on it. That then gives you a drop-down list of plots to choose from. So it basically limits that list to just the plots that have been created for that particular square. So I've gone to the drop-down menu. I found the plot that I am specifically entering data for that particular survey. I've selected that. And then the spatial reference underneath will autofill. You don't need to put anything in that. It will autofill, and the map will zoom into the location of that plot. So you can see there, that's where the plot is that we created earlier. It's along this sort of right angle, and we started at that red point. That is the plot. It's always good to sort of eyeball, have a little look at that map and go, yeah, that is definitely the plot I'm thinking of. Perfect. We press next step. So we've got the location. And the other thing, we keep saying that we can't edit a plot until we've created data, but it is also worth noting that you can't enter any data at all unless you've created your plots. So obviously you're not able to move on to the next step unless you've selected a plot, and you can't select a plot until you've created it. So moving on to the survey details. The first thing you do at the very top there is select the survey at which, the level at which you surveyed the plot. So did you survey it at the wildflower, the indicator, or the inventory level? Which of course mainly means how many species you were looking out for and that you recorded. So I selected wildflower here as an example. Then you put in the date that you conducted the survey. And then you select the broad habitat type that you identified your plot to be within. I've gone for lowland grassland here. Once you've selected the broad habitat category, a second box comes up with a condensed list of the finer habitat types. So from that, I would need to select one of, in this example, dry acid grassland, dry calcareous, and so on. So then once you've entered your habitat type, you then check any management types noted. Now, you're not limited to one here, but if you do know of any management types, or you noticed something, or perhaps the landowner told you about something that's been going on overlapping your plot, or maybe even nearby, you can tick any of that below list. Or if there's anything additional, it's not an extensive list there, you can tick other and you can enter something else as well. That's all really useful information, because ultimately we're really interested to find out not just what you're seeing on the plots, but perhaps what might be contributing to what you're seeing on the plots. And so the management of these obviously is incredibly linked to what we're seeing. And the note here that I've put on more to remind myself to say is that the online entry form really replicates the in-field recording forms. So you're not needing to sort of interpret what you've written out in the field or try and make sense of it. You're literally copying exactly the same information from your paper form directly online. So there's more survey details. This is the bigger section. You insert the grazing pressure, whether low, medium or high, on which animals were grazing, if you know, how wooded the plot is, and so on, the different vegetation height codes. Essentially, as I say, copying what you have on your recording form from the field. You then pop in your recorder name. That actually autofills, basically depending on the count that you're logged in as and the square that you're associated with. But we have it as an additional box just in case somebody helped you on that day or somebody did it for you. Sometimes we have groups that sort of take on or share the load with squares. So just make sure that you've got the correct person there in the recorder name. And then you have the where we ask you for the DOMIN scale to estimate the percentage cover of bare soil, bare rock, litter, and mosses and lichens. So that's where that's housed as well. That's slightly different from the recording form because that's actually right at the end of the recording form, but it's within the survey details. And the very last thing for survey details is we ask you to upload a photograph of the plot. Again, the reason we ask for it here is, of course, your original photo that you put for the create a plot. That's when you created it, but we do ask that you take photographs again each time you survey, and this is where you would put it, because of course your plots may well change over time. So you add your photo and then you can add any additional comments there. That tends to be anything that may have affected the survey results. Perhaps it's been particularly wet recently, perhaps it's been particularly dry. If you know any more information about management types, for example, if you noticed, I don't know, an infestation of something, anything at all that perhaps could be impacting what you're seeing on the ground is worth noting in additional comment. It's better to pop it in than not, just in case. Once all those survey details are entered, so those last couple of slides are actually all within sort of one section, the survey details section, you click next step. And then we're on the last section, our species records. So you're met with some instructions, some helpful instructions, helping you sort of find the quick way to enter, or your preferred way of entering the data. But essentially you type species that you recorded. You copy it from your list on your recording form into this box. As you go, name suggestions pop up, so you don't need to type in the whole thing. You might get, you know, the more you type in, the smaller the list becomes. That provides you with some suggestions, as you can see in the example here. And it's useful to know that you can start typing Latin or common names, because of course we've all got our preferences, or I certainly don't know all Latin names of species that I'm even, you know, really familiar with. So you can do that with either common names or Latin names. Start typing and it'll start giving you some suggestions, and you click on the correct one. Oh, here we go. There's an example where I started popping in a common name. Once you've popped the species in, to the right of it, then you can see there's the column for the abundance. So that's the box where you enter the abundance score that you provided on your recording form. And you can do that from a drop down, and it's quite handy as well, actually. It's a nice sort of triple check, because you give the code, so like as example here 4, but it also tells you the percentage as well. That sort of auto fills. So yeah, each time you've done the species, you then record your DOMIN scale abundance score. Excuse me. And you can see there as well, actually, that there is an option to, there's a big red cross, so there's an option, if you've accidentally entered the wrong species, you can remove it. The other thing I would note as well is you can see just above these examples, there is a box to tick if no indicator species were observed. And that's basically because we need to know if somebody goes to a plot and they have carried out the survey, but none of the species, you know, that are on the list at their survey level were actually there. That's useful to know. If we go there and we don't see any of those species, we should still enter, you know, we need to enter our data, we need to fill in the survey form, because that's really useful information. Sort of the absence data is just as useful. If we don't fill in the data, we might just think that somebody didn't carry out that survey rather than those species weren't there. So once all of our species are in, of course, there'll be a shorter list if you're doing at the wildflower level, a longer list at the indicator, or a much longer list again at the inventory level. But once all your species are in and you've recorded the abundance score, you just press save. And that's it. That's how we enter our data. And just so that we can then go back and look at it, you can find the data that you've previously entered, or I should say the surveys that you've previously entered, by heading to your tracking the impact section in the menu and my visits. If you select to look at the my visits, you'll see that each time you submit a survey, so whether that's, you know, 5 different surveys, 5 different plots, perhaps 10 surveys, because you surveyed 5 plots in spring and you've done another 5 plots now in late summer, you'll see that each time you've submitted one of these surveys, it'll be stored in the database and it will appear in the list of surveys on your My Visits page. So if you were in training mode, which we were talking a little bit about earlier, you'll only see your practice data entry tests, because as I say, you're in training mode. But out of training mode, when you're happy, you're confident on Plant Portal and you've unchecked that box and you're going for it, you're confident, once you're out of training mode, you'll only see a list of the real data that you have submitted to the project. So before you've submitted any data, even when you've got, you know, even if you have created your plots, if you haven't submitted any survey data, the list will of course be blank, as it is shown by here. You've got a blank map and we've got it says no information available. Basically, you haven't entered any data. But here's an example where data has been entered. As you enter the surveys, these appear on the map. Again, you might see the little blue dot there, and that's where somebody has conducted a survey and they have entered the data. So it's shown on the map and also in the list below the map. So we can see there, this person has entered one survey, data for one survey at this location. So for each, and you know, you can get a longer list of all the surveys you've entered, and for each you can see the square name, you can see the plot location, the survey date, and you can also see on the right hand side there of the list there is also an option to edit each individual survey if needed. So if you, I'm trying to think of why you might want to edit a survey, you might want to go back and go, actually, do you know what, I called that the wrong species. I got that wrong. I've been back, you know, I went in spring, I thought I knew what it was. I went back in summer, and now I've seen it fully, you know, flowering. I've realized that I got it wrong. You can go in and you can edit it. You know, there's no huge dilemma. You don't need to think, oh gosh, I've given the wrong information. You can go back, edit it. And what you'll see is you'll just see the form as you entered it, how we've just worked through it then. You just work through the form. If there's anything incorrect, you can go in and maybe delete a record and add another one if it was the wrong species, for example. Perhaps there was some management type going on that you weren't aware of, and you found out later that they had been something going on. You can add a management type. So for any reason you might need to edit data that you've already entered, you can do so there. And that's it in terms of your data entry.
Rachel, just quick question on data entry. On the so on Breeding Bird Survey and Wider Countryside Butterfly Survey, there are kind of a series of first check error messages. So say you said, oh, I saw 5,000, I don't know, golden orioles, and it's a typo, or so it said are you really sure? Do they appear if you see a rarity or something out of season or something out of context, or is it just to reduce that?
So there are auto checks. I don't think you necessarily see them there. I think they go sort of via iRecord. There's sort of certain automated checks, and if there's anything that's sort of out in the ordery, there is sort of a little flag put on that row of data, so to speak. A verifier will then go in and sort of look and see, is this a real flag? Is this a real, you know, what do we think? And they may then get in touch. They might, you know, send a message via your account.
So on the other systems, you get that happens twice. So as a surveyor, if you put in 5,000 instead of 50, say, did you really mean to say that? It's all no typo. And then as a project administrator, I have then a second level of sign off to say, so I look back through it and I say, did you really see I don't know, a field fair in the middle of June? Oh no, sorry, typo. And I could, before you get to that, but it sounds like that doesn't.
No, and I think there's a few more sort of restrictions when you're entering the data. So, for example, you don't actually type in the number of species that you'd see.
That's true. Yeah, cool.
A 1 to 10 on the Domin scale, so you're not necessarily going to do anything.
And if you're going off of a wildflower list or an indicator list, you're only getting so in a way you've pre-secured it anyway.
That's it, and that's exactly why we sort of adopted this methodology, is because there's certain amount of quality assurance in place as you go, so to speak. There are, of course, there's 2 layers of of verification, but we actually think it's a little bit, which to be honest is a huge task, but by limiting people to only selecting certain species from a list that they've said that they're comfortable recording at the wildflower level, at the indicator level, it tends to reduce the amount that's required, so we don't necessarily have those checks. Right, let me have a little look. Oh yes, so I was going to say, as well as seeing your visits, there's actually 2 ways that you can download the data that you've previously entered if you want to. If you wanted to download your own data, that might be something that perhaps a landowner's requested. They said, oh yeah, that's absolutely fine, you can come and survey here, but I'd really like to see a copy of the data perhaps, or perhaps you want to look at the data you collected last year in one place, rather than clicking through your visits. So you can do that by heading to, again, projects, and you can go to data download, I believe, which basically does what it says on the tin. You press data download and you are met with this form where you basically put in the type, my records. I think that's the only option that you have. Obviously, you can't download other people's records. A date field, so if you only want to see what you recorded last year, or you want to compare what you recorded. I mean, we've only been doing it for 2 years, but maybe in a couple of years' time, you might want to compare, 5 years apart. So you can put in your start date and an end date, and you can select the format at which you want to download that, whether it's a separate CSV in an Excel, for example, or a Google Earth KML map or whatnot. You can download your data in that way. I'm not sure how popular that's going to be at the moment. It might be something that we use a bit more in the future, but I thought I would just flag it as well. So are there any other, I can see that, I don't know where time is flying, but are there any other questions before I show where there's extra sort of resources on the website?
I've got a question about selecting habitats, fine habitats. It's to do with our plot covers the top of the hill down to heading downhill. and there's a plot at the top which looks like it's dry calcareous grassland, and ones at the bottom. I started off thinking it was neutral grasslands, but it's not going to have a. When I looked at one of the videos later on, it said it needs to be base, so not neutral or acidic. Is that right? Because it seemed to have the right plants for neutral grasslands, but I doubt very much if it's actually.
I think it would, yeah. Well, it's tricky, isn't it? If the plants are generally looking to be plants that would be in neutral. I mean, obviously it depends on the soil type. If you know much about if you are able to assess the soil type or get an idea of the soil type, but I think the vegetation that's there will be a good indication.
So use the
what it is.
to decide on. Use the vegetation to decide which.
I must admit, it's a real combination. You can't just use the vegetation because you use the vegetation, thinking about sort of any water source, how damp it is, how dry it is, where any water is coming from. If there is water, there's a real combination. But what I would say is, if you're not sure, by all means, you are very welcome to send. What we tend to ask when people ask, because this is super common when people ask us for help with fine habitat queries, we ask for a photo, a bit of like a list or a picture of your list of species that you've seen, any sort of combined attributes or description of the plot location, where we know where you are geographically, but you are more than welcome to email us that information, and we can try and ask some questions and puzzle out between us what habitat type that you have there.
Right. Okay.
It sounds like you started confident that it was neutral, but now you're questioning.
It was only because I saw this video, which quite early on, sort of focused on the.
So what is it particularly in the video changed your mind?
I think he actually said I think he was talking about acidic or base. He used the word base, which doesn't mean acidic.
If it's base rich, it would tend to be more acidic. Are there any other indications that it's acidic?
No, it isn't acidic. I shouldn't think it's acidic at all. I mean, we live a very similar sort of situation down off the hill, and it would be fines washed off the hill, I would have thought. So
I think you're there on the ground, and if you're the person that's there, seeing it. I think if you're initially confident that it's neutral, it sounds like it probably is.
Thank you.
Okay. So hard with these things, not being able to see and kind of get out and have a look. But yeah, if you do want any habitat help, do get in touch with various information, and we can try and puzzle it out. So I'm just really.
Rachel, can I just say something?
Yeah.
I'm so relieved that I haven't entered any data yet, because if I had, it would be too late to amend my plots. But I think it's really worth highlighting that to volunteers, that you've absolutely got to be sure of all your plot detail before you start entering data. Yeah,
it's a really good point. I must admit, there is a way about it. We just don't advertise it. Okay. So
anyway,
as administrators, but it's a really good point actually, and I'm glad you said that, because I should say, if there are any issues, or there are any updates that are needed, as administrators we can update your plot. So if you need to say, oh, please can you add this information, or if you send a photo, could you add this photo, or we even need to amend the coordinates, I'm not where I thought I was, we can, as administrators, edit the plots. We just don't, as I say, we almost don't tend to advertise the fact that we can alter it, purely because we don't want people recording in one location and then sort of shifting their plot and recording it, but giving it the same name, so to speak. But because the species lists will be all attributed to one place, and actually they were in different places. But that's a really good point. I think we do need to make it clearer that you can't amend. I think it might say it on the plot page, but if it doesn't, it's probably not big enough. So that's really useful feedback, that we need to make that clearer.
Thank you.
So if because I did make a bit of a mess last year, I think the plots locations are right, but if I go in and check them this year and find they're wrong, which administrator do I contact, you or Nick?
What, do you know, this is a conversation Nick and I
Is
were
it?
just having, because I would have previously said Nick, but I think, Nick, your current permissions are not letting you do that kind of thing.
There are some simple things like Anne trying to turn your training thing off that I don't seem to have access to. So
Mm.
I guess it's a capacity thing, isn't it? Really, if it may be easier if you come through me, Marianne, I can maybe then fill those. So I don't know, Rachel, your capacity, you answer the question.
I think,
It's
no,
easier to come
mine,
through
yeah.
me. Or...
I think, ask for you, but what I think, Nick, will be really useful is if we do sort of a review sort of internally, you, me and Ollie,
Yeah.
And just what your permissions actually are, and just reviewing what you are able to do, and for us to give you sort of, you know, a
Yep.
crib sheet as well of if you get this query, if you get that query, and then it's done. Then it's a bit more, it's a bit more efficient, isn't it? I think if we do
Yeah,
it.
and on the other two surveys, they're I guess I'm probably closer to them, but I can pretty much deal with 99% of the queries that come through.
Yeah.
The way they're set up, and I know them a bit more. Whereas, yeah, sometimes what should be a very simple thing, I just can't either work it out or I don't have permission to do it. So, but I think maybe if you
there's
come
anything
through
like
me,
that, yeah,
come
it's fine.
through me first, and I can forward them on to you, because there may be issues that you're facing, Marianne, that others are facing as well, and I can field those if that's all right. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Well, so the last thing I just wanted to make you aware of that is that there's actually quite a lot of other resources and whatnot on Plant Portal that could be really useful. So handily put in the resources and training section of the menu at the top there. But the first thing before I do that is just to make you aware, you may have seen when you first go into Plant Portal that there's almost sort of two modes, we'll call it modes of Plant Portal. There's the standard, which is essentially, it is again a data portal or a repository for data that's being collected in different ways, sort of using different sort of standardized methodology. And then it's called MPMS Plus. So you don't necessarily need to worry about this unless you are going to go and seek, you know, other further resources or training. But essentially, this is for anybody that's entering data using MPMS methodology, which you are. And that's really because we've been having another pilot project where we've got other projects and groups across the country adopting MPMS survey methodology. So if you click on to take me to MPMS Plus, because you would like to use some of these additional resources, it'll take you to this page here on the right. And you can see that there are MPMS Plus resources and MPMS Plus online training. Or you can just find that under resources and training, and you can see here you've got your training and your resources as well as training. But in that list, I just didn't think it was as clear because it's got both for standard and MPMS. Whereas if you just head to the MPMS Plus page, you're only really met with the things that you're going to use, the MPMS Plus information. So if you select online training, don't be off put by all of the information. This is because a lot of our projects record additional habitats, like urban habitats, for example, major grasslands and whatnot. So there are some supplementary information, some supplementary species lists and ID guides. But I've highlighted here with my big sort of loopy red circle the training that may be useful if you did want to take a look at it following today. Hopefully I've been clear enough today, but by all means, do have a little look at these training courses as well. There's one that's how to use the Plant Portal for volunteers and users, and there's also how to use the Plant Portal to enter data. So these are essentially e-learning modules that my colleague Sarah has developed, and they're a little bit more sort of hands-on. They're click by click, you know, you're not just sat listening to me. You can sort of click by click, or you can find the sections that you particularly need help with, whether it's to edit your account, whether it's to add your plots. If it's to edit your plots, you can work through. You don't have to work through the whole thing. You don't have to watch it all. And it's a real combination of click through and videos. So that's super helpful, how to use the Plant Portal. And then also, as I say, how to enter your data on the Plant Portal. And again, you just select the areas that you would like some support with. So they're really helpful too.
Can I say something on that? Because
Yeah.
I got in a mess last year. I used these videos, and on these videos, it says that if you're doing indicator species, you can add additional species that are not indicator. So, you know, I recorded a lot that were not indicator, and then I actually put them onto my record. So then when Nick was showing the slides of what had been recorded, mine came out as being incredibly rich, and it wasn't.
Oh gosh, right, okay.
So I actually need to go back and take the edit and take those off, which I haven't yet done. So I'm fine with that, but it's just that
That's really helpful.
Nick and I think it was Sarah eventually told me, no, the one that we use, tracking the impact, doesn't have the capacity to add additional species. You should just stick to the indicator. And if I want to do it for myself and the farmer, that's different. It's outside the portal.
Right, that's really helpful. I'm going to double check. Perhaps that conversation you had with Sarah, she's gone in and edited this, but I don't know if she has. So I've just written this down now. I've got my pen and I've just written down to go and check. It'll be because of some of the other projects you can. So she just needs to, I need to be honest, all this background e-learning module things isn't my area, but I can certainly ask her to edit it so that she can say this is only for X, Y, and Z project, not for tracking the impact. Because thank you. That's really helpful. I'm going to go and double check that. And the very last thing is that, of course, there's lots of resources available there as well. If you don't want to go and look at the MPMS website, you know, you don't want to scooch between the two websites and go back and forth between the MPMS website and the plant portal. We've uploaded a lot of our core MPMS guidance now on the resources that are available on the plant portal. So that was the only other thing that I wanted to say. Of course, you are more than welcome to use the MPMS website. And as well, you know, use our training resources, our species ID and habitat training. We've got loads of YouTube videos that could be really useful if you want to sit back and watch a webinar, or perhaps Sarah out in the field with some ID help. Maybe even they're not related to your plots, but you just find it really interesting. By all means, do use them, and do let me know if you'd like to sign up to any of the MPMS training events as well. So that was all that I wanted to say, and just say thank you very much. The data is super important. I popped this in here as a bit of a data flow, just to show that once you've created your plots and you've carried out your surveys, we tend to ask you to input your data by a certain time. Now, I've been a bit naughty here and I put in the MPMS date that we ask people to input their data by. So I don't know what the date is, and I thought I'd open the floor to you, Nick, there to say when you'd quite like the data to be entered by for the Tracking the Impact project.
It's good call. So I haven't got a strict cut-off date on there. I guess the sooner the better, really. So the sooner we can get the data off, but I haven't got a strict cut-off date. So I don't want to push you too hard in terms of getting data in, but I guess the sooner it's in, the sooner we can then start to kind of get it across to get those maps produced, really. But that's a very vague answer. Maybe I should have a cut-off date, but I don't want to push you into corners, guys, in terms of your timings to get things in. But end of October would be lovely. If it's sooner than that, brilliant. But if it's later than that for other reason, that's equally fine. I guess there's a point around the longer you leave it, the longer it goes out of mind. You forget little bits of detail about your visits, those kind of things. But end of October would be brilliant. If you can do it sooner, that would be even better. But maybe I should be a bit more clear.
Well, do you know, we're in the same boat as well. It's worth me saying the plant portal will not stop accepting data after a certain date. You know, the MPMS website's the same. We tend to put a date on it and we say, if you want the data to be included in an overwinter analysis, please do it by this date, because that's the date that we're doing the analysis, so to speak. But yes, we're never going to stop anybody entering any data. Certainly, you know, these things pop up, don't they? You think you've lost something. I've had somebody recently that said, oh my goodness, I thought I'd lost these sheets from sort of 2-3 years ago, but I'm moving house and now I found them. Still good data, we're still going to accept it. But yes, once it's in, then of course we can analyze data, or Nick and the team at the Impact can analyze it, and it can be used for.
So our broader plans, just on all three of the surveys, it took a little while longer last year than we kind of hoped to get the data analysis across. Now we've got the mapping set up and some of those basic kind of provision of those maps. It's a very simple process to literally just plonk this year's data to the guys who are doing the mapping and update the map. So I'd like to do that. It'd be lovely if I could have that done before Christmas. So I guess end of October works brilliantly from getting the data in. I've got then time to get it across to Dan, who does the analysis work with the bird and butterfly data, and work it all into that kind of. So we're ready, I guess, in New Year with the data up ready, rather than last year it was kind of mid-February by the time we had the maps produced. So
yeah, it's tricky. We always sort of underestimate that time between the last data going in and then working it all through and reporting and whatnot. But yeah, like that was it. I'm really aware of the time, so that was it for me. Sorry, chaps, I've overrun.
Can I just say I'm extremely grateful to Nick and Rachel for giving up their evening time. This has been an extremely useful session, so thank you.
thanks very much. Maureen, thank you for giving up your time doing the surveys. This is work for us. It's your hobby, so hopefully we can make it easier and more fun for you. But your teething problem out of the way.
Yeah. You're more than welcome. I'm glad. As Nick said, we're really grateful you're getting out there and spending your time collecting the information, and we would hate for it to then be sat on a desk or a drawer, and we want to make sure that your efforts go to good use, basically. So I'm glad you found that helpful, and as I say, I will send this to Nick as well for him to circulate.
That'd be brilliant. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you, Rachel, for giving up your evening to help us through, and all your support through the project, not just here, with everything else. Well, it makes a big difference. So thank you for that. Enjoy your evenings.
I can see you all now.
Thank you.
Whenever offside, yeah.
You are there. Lovely. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks,
Enjoy your evening. We'll see you in a bit. Thanks,
You
Rachel.
too.
See you all.
Bye.
See you later.